Mr. Chris Voss, thank you so much for being here today, sir.
Hey, I'm happy to be with you. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. So, if there's one concept, one idea, something you hope people get out of your work, what's that one thing?
One, negotiation should be collaboration for long-term relationships.
Hmm.
Would be the shortest thing. There's a couple of other things on the heels of that, but that's to start with.
Explain that. Why do you say that?
Well, a lot of the aura, the mystique, the negative perception about negotiation is about, who's the biggest jerk in a room, who's the most demanding, who makes the most threats, who pounds the table the most, who kicks chairs across the room. And there are a lot of behaviors like that, histrionics, drama, that can be very effective short term, very short term, and extremely toxic, consequently counterproductive, self defeating long term. But in the moment, the satisfaction could be there. Great negotiation, there aren't, the brass bands aren't playing. The fireworks aren't going off in a great negotiation. It's not exciting. It is astonishing. Suddenly you're astonished that you're in this great collaboration and things are going really well and you kind of don't know how you got there. But great negotiation is not Real Housewives or Bar Rescue or, any of those TV shows where people are shouting and screaming at each other and getting their way. That's not great negotiation.
It's fascinating that you say that because, yeah, like you said, there is that perception of negotiation being like trying to kind of talk over a person or really just push your will onto them. Where if you
Right.
like read your book and look at your work, so much of it focuses on empathy and like relating to that person and really just listening.
Yeah, and empathy is really understanding. I mean, that word has been so twisted, misconstrued, adapted. Like I've got in my bookcase back here, I've got a dictionary from my father. So 50 years ago, the definition of empathy is different than it is today because all dictionaries, continue to adapt to how it's being used as to how it was really defined in the beginning. Empathy in the beginning was a translation of a German word that was designed to understand how an artist was trying to portray an emotion. It didn't mean that you adopted, accepted, or rejected it. It just meant that you understood what they were trying to portray.
Mm.
And that's real. And empathy has become conflated with sympathy, and it's not. It's even very close to compassion. My friend Stephen Kotler, in one of his books, he wrote, "Empathy is about the transmission of information. Compassion is the reaction to that transmission." Empathy can be a very compassionate thing to do. It can be a precursor to compassion, but it's not compassion. It's just, identifying where the other side's coming from
So really,
without
it's just
accepting or
understanding.
rejecting it. Understanding, which a lot of people will want to even equate understanding to acceptance. Like somebody will say, "Okay, so you understand where I'm coming from," and
Mm.
I'll say, "I may understand it. I don't agree with it. And I'm happy to understand it. I'm happy to respect it." So even understanding sometimes is someone's trying to manipulate you into a false agreement. Might say, "Okay, so you understand?" Yeah, I understand. I don't accept, but I understand.
Mm. It's funny reading your work because outside of just negotiation, like those skills that you present in the book, like the techniques of mirroring, saying no, listening, gaining that influence and trust, like all these things, they apply to so much more than just negotiation. Like I was running it through the filter of the podcast when I was reading the
Right.
book, and like all these things they're so perfectly applicable to so many different domains, not just negotiation.
Yeah, agreed. Or then maybe even how do you define negotiation? If
True,
if you
that's
define
interesting.
a negotiation as great collaboration,
Mm.
then there's a lot of negotiation, even in ways that people are shocked by. A couple of years ago, I'm going to try to get all the positions and the players right. And talking to a young lady in Los Angeles, she said, I work for Sony and I'm involved. We just buy the rights to songs for movies, and there's no negotiation there. They got a price. You either give it to them or you don't. You contact them, you tell them what song you're looking for, You fill out the paperwork and you execute the deal. That's not negotiation. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, so first of all, the person you talk to on the phone and they fill out the form. What do they do with that form? Do they take your form and they put it on the bottom of the pile based on how you talk to them? Do they put it on the top of the pile? Somehow do they let the form fall off their desk into the trash can? Do they take the form and walk it down the hall to the next office, thereby saving you a month? Like there's so much involved. There's so much negotiation going on there that you don't even realize. If it's about great collaboration, there's very little in your life. If you're asking directions, you're negotiating over information. Person taking the time to talk with you and give you information. Like if you start looking at it as just a greater collaboration, there are very few human interactions that wouldn't fall into that category.
That's fascinating. So then, with that said, having such a deep understanding of negotiation, I'm sure that's influenced and impacted your life in like a lot of different ways, and just your ability to move through the world. Like, how has that deep understanding of those things translated to everything else?
That's a great point. There's a lot less friction in my, this is going to sound arrogant. There's less friction in my life than there is in yours, or almost everybody that's listening. Because the friction points throughout an entire life that slow us down, where even if we get our way, it takes a little longer, and the interaction was negative. And so then maybe we got our way and we burned up negative energy, and then we left negative energy behind us, which then made the world a worse place, the karma bank. Like I'm putting deposits in a karma bank constantly. And I'll give you another example. I'm getting ready to jump on a plane in an airport. A couple of weeks ago, I got my director of operations, Chelsea, with me. We're leaving from the same airport. We're going different places. We're both flying same airline. Since I fly all the time, like I'm in business class because of my status, because of how much money gets dumped into flying me around the country. She doesn't fly all the time. We get on the same airline. So I get into the preferred line, which is very short. She's supposed to be flying economy, very long. So I wave her into the line with me. So already we're breaking the rules. And I want to check her in on a different flight. And I want it to go quick and smooth with the lady behind the counter. And even if we get our way, like I'm executive platinum superstar class, sapphire, whatever the hell they are, I could have pounded the table and been so annoying that I'd have got us both checked in. But then what little things would have happened? So I walk up to the lady behind the counter and I go, I'm getting ready to be horrible. And she looks at me like, what? And I go, well, she's not flying business. She's with me, my director of operations, and she's not on the same flight. And I want to check her in here. And the lady says, that's not being horrible. That's being a gentleman. Come on up. And she checks, not only does she check her in, but she puts a priority tag on her luggage, which is not supposed to be there because she's not flying priority. Mm-hmm. But it does ensure extra care for her suitcase, and it gets taken care of, and it comes off the plane first. All the little things, like she didn't have to do that. It wasn't even with me getting us both checked in. So we got all the little things. The woman behind the counter had a delight. It went very quickly and smoothly. I walk away feeling better. The drag of an argument. I'm superstar class. You got to give this to me. I'm entitled. That would have worn me out. Instead, I walk away having a great time. My Chelsea, director of operations, gets some preferential treatment that she never would have got before. And the lady behind the counter is happier than she was when we walked up. So the next person doesn't get it taken out on them in a negative way. So the little friction points like that throughout my entire life that people just assume are part of living, 90% of them I eliminate on a regular basis.
That's so interesting. I think about how, you that story that you mentioned of just being a good person, essentially, right? But I'm also curious about like the flip side of that. So like, outside of the tactical empathy, I'm sure there's times where it's tactically smart to be a bit of an asshole. And like the
No,
example that's coming to mind for me
no.
is, well, the reason why I
Go ahead,
say
give
this
me the
is,
example, and I'll talk it
okay,
through. But
okay, perfect. So
I'm letting you know it's coming.
yeah, so I have a friend who works in real estate, and they
Right.
deal with contractors all the time. And they were real fed up one day, and the contractor was taking forever doing all this stuff, and they kind of just snapped. And after the contractor, so it was like, oh shit, I didn't realize how big of a priority this was for you. We'll speed up the process. And then they sped up the process, whatever. And then the takeaway that he told me was, I didn't know how to speak contracteese or contractorese, because so much of that business is, um, I guess, spoken in that way. So if you're almost too nice and too friendly, they put you lower on the totem pole in terms of priority.
Yeah. All right. So there's to me, it's like, how did you get into this in the first place? Like there's a fair amount going into this. How are you managing the relationship? How are you managing the situation? Anticipation of problems. Now there is. It's not that you want to be too nice. I mean, little things along the way. You can be simultaneously nice and just set up really hard boundaries without being a jerk.
Mm.
And you can kind of anticipate stuff in advance. And I got some work done with a contractor in my house recently. And the little things, like I asked this dude up front, like, what kind of scotch does he like? Now, I could offer him a tip, the equivalent of the cost of the scotch. Or I can find out and go get it and have it waiting for him before he gets ready to start. Because the time that I've taken to find out what his favorite kind of scotch is, and the time that I've taken to go and get it. Now, I got a whole bunch of stuff. This does not cement the relationship for the entirety of the operation. But and it's not enough. I mean, you gotta constantly be attending to this, because I know there's going to be problems. There's going to be priorities. Contracting business, very difficult business. Project management, managing your cash flow. There's a lot going on there, and contractors like doctors, they could be great at building, but not be great at running a business. And a contractor business is tough. So let's begin to anticipate some of the problems. And how do I nurture the relationship? You know, how do I anticipate what they're looking for in advance? You know, I got to stay on top of the relationship. If you're not staying on top of the relationship, then there's a pretty good chance you're going to get to a point in time where they made a bunch of promises to you that they didn't keep, because they're making promises to everybody. You find yourself in a bad spot. And occasionally, nobody's perfect. You're going to find yourself in a bad spot. Maybe you don't have time to attend to every relationship. And are you snapping in the moment as a tactic, or is it a legit snap? Now, if I
Mm.
snap in a moment, I'm gonna end up apologizing, because the toxic residue there is always going to cost me more. And I snap at people occasionally. I'm guilty of that. I'm a natural born assertive. I mean, sometimes when I'm talking in a normal tone of voice, it might feel like I'm yelling at you. Was that the commercial I think Jim Harbaugh did a long time ago when he was coaching the 49ers. You know, I'm not yelling, I'm not angry. You know, his natural tone of voice makes you feel beat up. But when you're interacting with someone, you want a long-term relationship with a contractor. And the same guy that, you know, I got the bottle of scotch for, he said, no, you don't need that. And I think he expected it when he was done. I had it waiting for him in my backyard when he showed up to get the job done. Now I got follow-up work with this dude. And he comes by and he troubleshoots the problem. And as he's getting ready to go, there's been no mention of cost, price, or anything. I just go ahead and say to him, how do I pay you? It's like, no, I didn't fix it yet. Like, I'm willing to pay you for your time. So there's a certain amount of anticipation of problems, especially with contractors. Tough business. How do I put myself on the music, purchase of the music that I was talking about before? How do I put myself on the top of the pile instead of the bottom of the pile? what are the little things I can do along the way? That still doesn't mean I'm going to be a pushover. I can be very nice and not be a pushover at the same time. What I want to do is position myself for, as a human being, they're going to make mistakes. Well, I'm like, come on, come on. And maybe it was something that happened in their life that they had no control over. There's a lot of stuff going behind the scenes on the other side. That's not to say that there isn't going to come a point in time when you're going to snap at somebody, because the world being what it is, time constraints being what they are, it's going to happen. My personal experience is every time I've snapped at someone, no matter how righteous it was, in the long run, it ended up costing me more.
I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. It's like really just doing the little things on the back end to ensure that that moment doesn't need to come up. You don't need to have to do that thing when you are making sure that you are the guy at the top of the pile, because you're doing the courteous and respectable thing of paying early, paying fast, making sure that you're just building up that trust, like one of your key techniques. And I mean, just all that stuff reminds me of, like you mentioned, Jim Harbaugh, and just leadership in general. And think about like a football coach or a CEO, like all of those things. It's such a fascinating way to be assertive, firm, but still likable. Like it's a good balance between those three.
That's a blend, yeah, yeah. And the more likable you are, more assertive you could be.
Interesting. Interesting. So the balance there is just making sure on the back end that you're building up trust and that they know that you're a, a good person. Essentially, what is it on the back end that we should be doing as a leader to ensure that we can still be firm in our boundaries without offending other people?
Yeah, well, first of all, substitute the word predictability in for trust. The more predictable you make dynamics, the more people are going to trust you. And the less you let people get caught off guard. If you're work on problems you are encountering versus problems you might encounter. Solve problems with the people that you work with in a way that, because if a problem has come up, it's going to come up again. There's system thinking is the system you're employing is perfectly designed to give you the outcome that you've obtained. What does that mean? If you ran into a problem, that whatever approach you took that you got you into that problem makes it very likely it's going to happen again, unless you make an adjustment in your approach, your collaboration, your weaknesses, your shortcomings. What are you likely to do? What kind of mistakes are you likely to make? And with the people that work with you and for you, and anticipate the kind of mistakes that you're likely to make. If you're working for me and your contact with me is sporadic, then it's going to be overly harsh. Because then if it's sporadic, I'm only reaching out for you when there's a problem. So, I got to anticipate that. And then encourage feedback. And, in the past, I've had a tendency when I got a problem, I'm blasting out text messages after hours on the weekends to people. I find out the hard way that I'm conditioning somebody that's working for me. Like whenever he sees a text alert from me, he goes into panic because he feels it's bad news. So my first move is to stop sending out, stop barking out orders after hours and on the weekends. And then secondly, do as much as I can to stop doing it via text, because human beings are Pavlov's dog. Every time the bell rings, the dog begins to salivate. Every time the phone buzzes and it's a text from me, massive anxiety is in place. So I got to make adjustments. I got to send out on weekends appreciation texts. Ideally not at night. And you know what? Even an appreciation text on a weekend can be tough. So I gotta look at my behavior, look at the kind of outcome that's correlating very strongly with it as a leader. If I don't like the outcome, I don't want somebody having a panic attack every time they get a text alert from me. If they're getting a panic attack based on my text, it's a system that I've created. So let me make an adjustment so that it's different.
I love using systems and implying systems in your life, how you think, like all these applying systems. If I think back on the past year for me, has been probably the biggest, has had the biggest positive impact on me. Um, because going from being disorganized to being organized in how you approach things has such a beneficial result on your life. And um, how have you implied that systems thinking into both your work and life in general?
Well, and here's what I'd ask you to expand your thinking a little bit, because everybody has a system. A system is just a collection of your behaviors and habits. And your system previously was to be disorganized. That was your system. And then at some point in time, you realize if I make an adjustment in the system, I can shift my outcomes and suddenly be unorganized. And lo and behold, my life is accelerating. Look at that. And are you wired that way? Or did you learn to be that way? Like a long time ago, I remember reading Everything Has Its Place. And I thought, everything has its place. What the hell are you talking about? Are you talking about like my pencil has a personality and it lives someplace? That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. I remember thinking how stupid that was. And I still misplace things, but I'm misplacing things constantly. And I'm wondering, why can't I find anything? Well, I never know where the hell I put it down because it hasn't got its place. It's a lack of organization. That was my system. And I had a system that was great for me losing things. It was perfectly designed to give me the outcome that I've obtained. So systems thinking is, first of all, I think is, it's not that you're implementing, it's you recognize you've got it.
Yeah.
And then now, okay, can I do the tweaks here and there? Like, I've always been a great lover of spontaneity. Like the thought that I get up and I don't know where today is going. And it's going to be a great adventure. And I'm going to discover the day. Consequently, when I first started my business, I didn't want to put anything on my calendar. Because I'm like, you're confining me. The day's not going to be this adventure, this discovery. And then I found we're not getting stuff done. Well, you're not putting it on your calendar. And I've gone from hating to have anything on my calendar to want to live by my calendar. Because I'm interested in the outcomes. So I'm glad you recognized system thinking and you discovered you thought you were putting in a system when in point of fact you just change it. You switch
Yep.
from one to another and you change your outcomes.
It's having the awareness of the system that you already have in place and having the awareness of knowing what a better system would be. And that
Yeah,
awareness, it seems like that applies to all of negotiation as well. Like that is such a key element at the core of having a good negotiation is broadening your field of awareness.
yeah. Broadening your fear of what a negotiation is, and you throw in a system, and then you realize, a system takes care of most of it, not all of it, and then the spontaneity, the magic, the discovery still happens, and you've saved that energy, that creativity, that curiosity for when it was needed.
So what are you up to nowadays? I know you said you were flying around all the time. You're doing speaking engagements. Are you doing consulting as well?
The whole nine.
The
Like
whole
my
nine.
company, we coach negotiations. What some people would call consulting. We coach and train individuals and companies, mostly entrepreneurs or people with an entrepreneurial mindset or learning mindset. But we do, I do keynotes where I do talks that are, keynote. What's a keynote's is ideally it's an inspirational talk that'll fire you up. And then my keynotes are littered with usable, actionable negotiation advice and some stuff around it that sort of fires you up about the possibilities. But, we coach, we train, we teach online, in person. I mean, me and my company, Black Swan Group, we're about having people actually have better lives and teaching them the communication behaviors and patterns that will make a difference in somebody's life. And the cool thing is, it does. I get people coming up to me all the time talking about how they're having a better life in general. Instead of having one negotiation success every 2 or 3 years, they're having spectacular negotiation successes monthly, almost to the point where they're taking it for granted because they're making such a difference in their lives. And that's cool. I dig that.
What are a lot of those commonalities that you hear from people now, since you're really kind of in the thick of hearing from people who have read the book, curious about your work? Like when you're getting feedback from an audience or questions from an audience, like what are those biggest commonalities that people ask you about?
That they ask me about,
That they
or
ask
after
you
they've
about.
read me, or that they've told me about after they've read the book.
More like what questions do they have for you? What are some common things that you get from people in terms of just questions?
Well, if they've read the book or taken the master class, usually it's a combination of the two. If you've read the book and taken the master class, you're starting to make a really big difference in your life. And then the question is, what are you guys talking about that is not in the book or the master class? What have you learned? Can you coach me? Is your doctrine set in stone? Is it evolved? Is it different? It's evolved in a lot of ways. It's not really different. It's still within the confines of what we would define tactical empathy about, which is really demonstrating understanding and the breakthroughs that it makes in your interactions. Generally speaking, if somebody's got a question, they want to know, is there more there for me to learn other than what's in the book and the master class? And the answer to that is yes, because we keep evolving the thinking. And then also, negotiation is a perishable skill. It's not riding a bike, and you need practice. You need a tribe. You need like-minded people around you. There's a saying: your income is the average of the 5 people around you. Basically, 5 professionals around you. That's very true. And you don't want to be in your group if you're making the most money. Then they ain't helping you as much as you're helping them. It should be a two-way street. But to continue to level up your life, you need to continue to get around smarter and smarter people. And so if you're going to learn negotiation, you got to get people around you that speak the same negotiation language as you. And a lot of that is, how do I get somebody on my team to adapt? They think I'm crazy. They don't care that it's working. How do we integrate it into the team? Stuff like that.
Why do people think it's crazy? Like what about it? Because to me, it seems all very logical. Like the applying this approach to negotiation, your business, leadership in general. Like it seems so logical. I'm perplexed why someone would think it's crazy seeing someone else imply the lessons.
Well, until you've seen it work, there's a lot of really counterintuitive stuff. Like one of our most counterintuitive stuff that scares people to death is what we refer to as the accusations audit, which is take an audit of all the possible accusations the other side could have against you and then reel them off verbally at the beginning. And that scares people to death. And they feel like they're going to speak the devil into existence. And because they've never seen it work. And it's so counterintuitive. Like I don't want to bring up a negative. And there are people, I can remember a number of years ago, I'm talking to a political consultant in Washington, D.C. before the book came out. And I'm telling him about this whole approach to diffusing negatives by calling them out. He says, yeah, no, never plant the negative. You can't plant the negative. Don't ever do that. And he said, here's an example of why that doesn't work. Richard Nixon, 1970s, stands up just before he resigns from the presidency of the United States and says in a press conference, I'm not a crook. And this guy says, that's mentioning a negative and implanted it, and the whole country thought he was a crook because of that. So don't do that. And I said, that's not what I'm advocating. That's denial of a negative. Yep. The complete opposite is to get out in front of it. And how would you get out in front of it? You guys are probably going to see these behaviors. You're probably going to call me a crook. I'm listening to a sports talk show a number of years ago, and They're commentators talking about another player, and he says, "This is probably going to sound disrespectful, but," and he lays it out there. And afterwards, the other commentators say, "You know, as soon as somebody says," no, he says, "I don't want to sound disrespectful." He denied it. "I don't want to sound disrespectful, but," and he said, "You know, as soon as somebody said, I don't want to sound disrespectful, the very next thing they're going to be disrespectful." And if instead he would have said, "I'm probably going to sound disrespectful," and then made his statement, they would have said, "Wow, that guy's a straight shooter." So most of the backfiring of the mentioning of negatives has been the denial of the negative. But that's all people see, and they don't see the 2 millimeter shift from going from denying to simply observing. And then it scares them to do that because they've seen the backlash over the denials.
Hmm. It reminds me of in Robert Greene's book. I think it's in 48 Laws of Power. There's one that's like I don't know the exact thing, but essentially it's like tactical honesty. Like reveal your weaknesses in an honest way because it disarms people and like puts them at ease and makes you seem much more authentic in how you present yourself. It seems like it's a
Exactly.
yeah. Have
Yeah.
you
Very,
have
very same line of thinking.
have you read any of his work? Because there's such a underlying sense of psychology behind your book and the things that you talk about. It seems like they're interconnected in a few ways.
I think, I have read a lot of his stuff. I haven't read the stuff cover to cover. I've got the 48 Laws of Power. I've got the Laws of Seduction. I find him as a writer doing a great job of cataloging examples and writing stuff that gives you real food for thought. So I highly recommend Robert Greene stuff. I highly recommend Robert Cialdini stuff. There are a lot of guys out there that I read and I learn from. And I find a tremendous overlap in the thinking. And really, what you're going to find in great communication, great human interaction, you're going to find overlap a lot of places when you're talking with practitioners who are just looking for stuff that works, as opposed to coming up with a theory and then trying to force reality into your data set that you've chosen based on your cherry picking. And there are a lot of good thinkers out there. Like you could disagree with Cialdini, you could disagree with Robert Greene on anything, but read their stuff because they're going to give you tremendous food for thought. And Robert Greene is one of those guys. I love his stuff.
It's so fascinating because that underlying psychology that through line through all your guys' work, it's so human. And there's such a if you all of this world of negotiation, it's such a human to human
Yes.
interaction. And we're getting so much further, we're getting so far away from that human to human, like with AI and texting and all these things. There's so many things that kind of throw the negotiation for a loop or throw our human interactions off. Have you thought about now with the advancements in like ChatGPT and AI in general, how that that new world of negotiation is changing? Obviously, the underlying principles hold very true, but I'm curious on the advent of AI, how you think that changes things.
I think it's a great enhancement. I mean, to some degree, AI has been here for a really long time with the bots. I mean, we've been having bots, chat bots in customer service. They've been around for at least 10 years. You go on a website, you got a problem, chat with us now, and a bot shows up. It's so that was AI, and I was a couple of maybe a year or so ago. I was a little bit leery of AI until I started getting introduced to it in ChatGPT and being exposed to it, and then finally I was at a conference. Strategic coach. I get coaching. I get executive coaching. I get executive coaching from an outfit called Strategic Coach. Dan Sullivan, brilliant dude. A lot of brilliant people in the program, and a number of the panelists, other members, are talking about Chat GPT, and they said it's like having a great assistant. a great intern that'll do a bunch of work for you, get it 85% right, and then it needs your touch on top of it to get it the rest of the way there. And I'm at the point now, like I've hired people to work on my behalf to help me write stuff. And I got human beings that can't get it 85% right. I got human
That's the
beings that can't
truth.
get it 20% right. And I'm
That
like,
is
hell,
for sure.
I'd take 70% right. 85%, I'll take that all day long. So yeah, I see it as a great enhancement. If any human being is threatened by it, then this is going to sound harsh. You're either closed-minded or you're lazy.
Gotta learn some skills.
And either of those can be remedied on your own, on your behalf, should you make that choice.
Yeah, that is for sure. And I'm curious about the coaching stuff because um, I don't know. I mean, I played sports my whole life, and I'm so keenly aware of the value in coaching. And applying that principle outside of just sports is so interesting. How has having a coach and being involved in that world just helped you?
Well, one thing I couldn't help but run into over and over and over again when I left the government, got into the private sector, is there's a common thread of the top performing executives, whether they be coaches or entrepreneurs, with coaches, top performing executives with executive coaching across the board. Like I keep running into like phenomenal performers and find out that they're getting coached in some way. Now, finding a great coach is a challenge under any circumstances. Finding a great coach in sports, like my high school basketball coach understood X's and O's and didn't understand a drop of human interaction. Like I don't remember him giving me or anybody else on a team any individualized coaching that helped us at all. Now I really understood the dynamics of the game and could draw up great offenses, but did he make any of us better? Not a one. So do you understand the dynamics of the game and do you know how to talk to people? Though you got to find those guys. For me personally, going to strategic coach, and I got two kinds of coaches. We have, sort of an executive thinking coach, which is strategic coach. My business also gets coached in EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Got a guy named Jonathan Smith that coaches us on that. And, that's operating. And the strategic coach, the executive coaching is very complementary and very different. The other advantage I find at strategic coach, and I know I sound like a commercial for them, but they put you in a cadre of people that are like you, both income and experience and scope and challenges. And I go as much for the people I talk to, the people I'm sitting next to, as the learning, which is phenomenal, that I'm exposed to in a room. So it's also, to me, it's a break. I'll go spend a day at strategic coach. It tends to be refreshing, recharging. I need to break away from the day to day of the business to reboot the brain. And you need that a lot. And so I started into it because I'm looking around and I'm seeing the people whose outcomes I want to emulate getting coached. And I'm like, all right, so there's a commonality here. Take advice from people whose success you want to reproduce.
Hmm. And when do you apply the coaching? When did you start doing it?
Originally, I was around Jonathan Smith for several years before I finally said, let's give this guy a roll of the dice. And I knew him sort of as a professional association, and he's a generous dude. And for several years, have been doing me favors and helping me out, always encouraging. It was just me and my son in the business at the time, and then his fiance. And finally, I was just like, this dude Jonathan is a good enough guy. We trust him. Clearly, our core values line up. Let's give this EOS thing a roll of the dice. And a funny thing I've seen about EOS consistently, you try to pitch another CEO, head of a small company, on EOS, like, I don't know, I don't know, which is my attitude. Like, I don't know. And you start into it, and first month or two, you're like, I don't know. And then suddenly, 4 months in, like, this is awesome. Oh my God, things are running so much better. And there's a friend of mine in LA that, tried to talk him into EOS probably about 3, 4 years ago. And I don't know, we're doing pretty well. I know it's a lot of work to make the adjustment. And about 2 months ago, we started into it. And now he's like, this is awesome. So there's like invisible changes when suddenly, little by little, you're eliminating friction from your life. And then suddenly a month or two later, like you're rolling along and you're loving it. And it's very much like great negotiation because there aren't great big moments. But then all of a sudden you find yourself in a great place.
I mean, it makes me want to get a coach because there's so much like you don't know what you don't know, right? And having a other set of eyes that also has great knowledge, even if they're even if they're not that much ahead of you, just we lack so much self-awareness in so many instances. So I mean, just having that other person there that you trust it seems like it's everything.
Well, and one of the issues, even now that you're bringing it up, you got to be coachable.
Yeah,
You got to be
true.
coachable. Like you can get a great coach. If you're not coachable, it ain't going to do you any good. Um, you got to be coachable. Some people succeed based on sheer determination and hard work. And you need sheer determination and hard work. And some people, accelerate by being coachable. Like I like to think that I'm both. I don't think of myself. I'm not a high IQ guy at all, but I am very coachable and I do work really hard. So if you want to coach, you got to be coachable.
It's fascinating that you said you're not a very high IQ guy because
I am not.
you've
I
you've
am not.
you've written a book that's one of the most popular that's ever been written in nonfiction, and you've had so much of this tangible success. It's like, has would you boil it down to just those two things of being coachable and working hard? Do you think that's really at the core of what's allowed you to get to this place?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, in assembling a great team, first of all, yes, the book is one of the most successful nonfiction books ever written, and it's principally due to the guy that we hired to write it, Tal Roz. And Tal is a genius business book writer. In my opinion, the best business book writer ever. Now, books in many cases are like gas powered automobiles. Like an SUV and a minivan are not the same thing. An F1 race car and a minivan are not the same thing. Yeah, they're both gas powered automobiles, but writers and books are as different as automobiles are. And it ended up being a cliche. I remember hearing a long time ago, go to the bookstore, pick out the book you want to write, and hire that guy. And I'd come across a number of years ago, Never Eat Alone, Keith Ferrazzi's book that Tal helped Keith put together. And I loved it. It's one of the best networking and core values books out there. And it was readable and it was interesting, and it wasn't reading the encyclopedia. It didn't suck the life out of you. Some books you read them at night if you got insomnia. And I
That is for
really
sure.
enjoyed reading it. And finally, then I was lucky enough, circumstances lined up, and I could hire Tal to structure the book and put it together. And there was a lot more magic that he brought to the table. Tal worked with me and my son Brandon. Brandon's, essentially an uncredited co-author. But Tal then, he was also a great researcher, which I didn't appreciate that you really want in a writer, besides being a great writer and a structure of the book. But it's a readable, interesting book because of the way that Tal structured it. Genius writer.
Getting a great team, not the easiest thing to do.
Great team, right? Take the time to put together a great team.
That is for sure. Chris, is there anything, what do you think something is in the book and in your work in general that's fundamental that we haven't really spoke about today? Because there's so many different avenues we could have gone down. What do you think something that we'd be remiss if we didn't mention?
Listening is an advanced skill. Like in any business, any negotiation book that you read, any one of them, they refer to listening as an advanced skill, and so few people realize um, the the advanced nature of it, how fun it is. There's a reasoning aspect to it. There's an analytical aspect to it. There's a thinking aspect to it. Listening is not just keeping your mouth shut. Listening is not just waiting for your turn to speak. Listening is not listening for the "ha, gotcha" moments, which is actually a level up from just waiting for your turn to speak. If you're waiting for the "aha, gotcha" moments, you're actually a better listener than you were before. But there's much higher levels there. And then consequently, taking the time to listen actually accelerates everything. And it seems very indirect, when in point of fact, it's a great accelerant of all the best possible outcomes. It's a maximization technique. Optimize your communication by being a great listener. And a lot of people don't appreciate the value and complexity to actually listening.
And I don't think people realize that they're not actually listening. Like, I think
No, they
that
don't.
was something I learned from doing the podcast, is like, it's such an art. It's like a meditation in some ways. It's not the easiest thing to accomplish, to get to that point of just like no mind and just really just trying to hear and listen. And it's I didn't realize that I never really listened that intently in real life until I started doing this thing. And it's like, it really does just change your life in so many ways. And your ability to connect with people is just, it's multiplied to a degree that I can't stress enough. It's incredible skill.
Very well said. Very well said. Yeah, I agree completely.
So, Chris, thank you so much for doing this today. I mean, this was an absolute joy for me, and I so appreciate you taking the time to do this today. Where would you like to send people if people want to learn more about you and what you do?
Well, we'll send you a link if we can, and
Absolutely.
even we got a QR code. I don't know if you have the ability to drop it into the video, but what is it a link and a QR code to? We've got a top 10 no-oriented questions. Like we're out in the Black Swan Group. If you're trained by me, you're out of the yes business, and you're using no to accelerate things, and you're doing little things like saying, instead of "have you got a few minutes to talk," is now a bad time to talk. And it's one of those tiny little things that has a tendency to accelerate things. And we'll tell you what the top 10 no-oriented questions are in substitution to get you out of going for yes, so that you get that accelerator, that it's an enhanced decision-making tool for the other side. And then if you subscribe to our newsletter, which is complimentary, and the newsletter, The Edge, is a gateway to everything that we do. Our website is blackswanltd.com. But if you subscribe to the newsletter is a gateway to the gold mine. Every Tuesday morning, there's an actionable, concise article, usable, actionable, that'll get emailed to your inbox. Tuesday's a critical day to get to work, because Monday's kind of the buffer day where you're settling in for the week, organizing a week. Get down to business on Tuesday. Start with a negotiation article. If you use the link that we provide you with a QR code, when you sign up, you get down the top 10 no-oriented questions to help get you rolling and get you underway.
Amazing. And I've been subscribed to the newsletter for probably like a year at this point. And it's definitely been a great read and something that's added value to my life, and highly recommend everyone goes and picks up a copy of Never Split the Difference. Mr. Chris Voss,
Thank you.
thank you so much for this today.
Yeah, the pleasure was mine. Thank you.